Hey, what's going on, guys? WillJ824 here, and I am back with some more Call of Duty ranked play. This is more of me doing a voiceover. We have some hardpoint here on Greenberg Hotel. I just wanted to go over the last Call of Duty Major for Major 3 in Texas, which was the Optic Home Major for the series. I just kind of wanted to go over the maps and more the series for each of them. So starting in winners round, we had Seattle versus LA Guerrillas, and then we had Atlanta FaZe versus Los Angeles Thieves, and then following that we had Boston Breach versus Optic Texas, and then to close out the winners round we had Toronto Ultra versus the New York Subliners. First off, let's start with the Surge over the Guerrillas. Going into this, I thought it was going to be a very dominant Surge 3-1, 3-0 kind of thing, because the LA Guerrillas do have firepower. Exceed, Joe Deceives, Arcides, and Assault definitely have some firepower on that team. They can come out in the map, no question. They did when they first joined the team after dropping Hook and Neptune, and then I think it was Spart or Sprat, one of them. Can't remember which one. After dropping them and picking up Joe Deceives, Assault, and Exceed, they came out and they won 8 straight hard points in their first couple of maps. And so you never know what you can get with them. Coming into this major, Seattle Surge was kind of lacking. And you didn't know what you were going to fully get with Seattle. And towards the end of the major, they did start to close it out. They did start to do very well.
Target area updated.
Especially, they were having a hard time with their search and destroy, but they started picking up in their search and their hard point, and they've always been, in my opinion,
the area.
dominant whole team, especially on certain maps. So coming out to this one, it goes in a way that you wouldn't expect. Seattle Surge ends up coming out on top with a 3-2 victory. Seattle loses the first map with the Embassy hard, but they end up closing that out. And then LA Guerrillas comes back with a 6-3 Embassy search and destroy win. Going into Alfagra Fortress, garbage map. I would love to see that get out of ranked play and out of the map pool. I would love to see something else. LA Guerrillas come out with a 3-2 in that map series. And then going into your next hard point, you do have a Seattle Surge who dominates the score with a 250-89 on Alfagra Fortress. And then going into your map 5, we have an El Asilo, which was fairly close, but Seattle ends up closing that out in a 6-4 fashion. Pred ends up dropping a 1.39 over the whole entire series. And then you have Sid followed behind him with a 1.8. And then the only positive on the assaults on the LA Guerrilla side, as I was about to say, was Assault. Assault was definitely one of the catalysts. He dropped a 1.7 kill death ratio in their map throughout all 3. And yeah, Seattle just ended up coming out with the win, beating the better team. So now jumping into the FaZe versus Los Angeles Thieves round. Major 2 matchup, grand final matchup, rematch. Thieves is definitely out for blood. You're thinking they're going to come out hot. They're going to end it pretty well. Going in qualifiers, Thieves looked good. They looked like they went back into their true form, how they ended Vanguard being the world champions and everything. But Atlanta FaZe just unmatched, come out with a closer hard point on Mercado. With a 250-239 win, but their search and destroy and their Greenberg Hotel are absolutely unmapped.
Hardpoint relocated.
They come out and get to the thieves on search on Embassy.
Targets at the hardpoint.
Pretty sure if I'm right, Atlanta
Location
Thieves is still
updated.
undefeated
Capture the
on.
hardpoint.
And then they come out with a hot 3-0 against them on Control on Hotel. So, you know, there's a lot of big things going into that map, but I kind of want to move past it. So going into that, Celium dropping 1.6 in the whole entire series, and then you have Simp dropping to 1.44, and then you have a BZ dropping to 1.41, and then Slasher being very consistent dropping 1.0. Everybody on the Thieves side was negative, dropping negative kill-to-death ratios. But yeah, so Atlanta FaZe come out 3-0 against the LA Thieves in that first opening bracket. And then we get on to the Breach and Optic Texas. So
Get ready.
I had a lot of high hopes for Texas going into this. I thought that they were going to be a good team. It seemed like with picking up Ghosty in the beginning of of Major 3, sorry, it seemed like, you know, everybody's wondering why they dropped Illy and how Ghosty was going to fit in, and, you know, learning Ghosty fits in pretty well. He is very vocal for the team, and he is showing what he's going to do. But this was just a display that I was not ready for. Boston Breach came out flying, and that's all thanks to Beans, Nero, and Awakening. They all had a great series. That first Embassy hardpoint could have been a lot closer, with Boston winning 250 to 212. Scrap time, and they are able to get more things on the map kind of going their way. They hit earlier rotations. They don't get broken as easily. I think that could have been a swing for Optic Texas and them taking the map. And then we come into an LSCLO search and destroy. Boston Breach end up winning that in a round 11. 6-5. I've always thought Optic Texas looks very good on their destroys, and especially with picking up Ghosty and Hook before Scump retired. I definitely thought that they were frying.
Threats in the perimeter.
And they just kind of come out, and then they unfortunately lose a heartbreaker to Boston on Albagra Fortress, which then ends up closing out their winners run. They end up going down to losers bracket, and they end up going to take on the London Royal Ravens. So,
get ready.
Looking at the stats, Awakening 1.23 KD, Nero 1.6, and then Beans with a 1.59. They were absolutely just fine throughout the series, so I tip my hat to Boston. They were having a good match, and they just came out frying. So going on to the next one, we have Ultra versus Subliners. As you know, New York was the winner of the first major of this year, and Ultra's a very good team, especially adding Scrap. Scrap has been frying, so has Insight, and so has Kleenex. They've been having a good time, and they did just pick up Pixie instead of Standy. They dropped him. So we have a good 3-1 series. Ultra ended up coming on top with New York winning the first hard point, 250 to 246 on Greenberg Hotel. That was a very close one for them. And
Confirming
then
next hard point. Stand by.
the Subliners coming in and losing 3 to 6 to 3, excuse me,
Hard point relocated.
in
Secure the target area. All hunters,
search and
mission
destroy on
accomplished.
Albagra Fortress.
Lack a job.
So then you have, going into the control, you're one who's going to win. Toronto is very dominant. They have one of the best defenses and one of the best offensive in the control throughout the whole entire league. And then with that being said, Toronto just comes out and shows what they're made of. They get a pretty convincing 3-1 victory over the Subliners with that. And then going into the hydroelectric hardpoint, still pretty close one, but Toronto ends up closing that out 250 to 220, which now closes out the winner's bracket, with your winners round 2 being Surge versus FaZe and Breach versus Ultra. We'll be getting into those after I go over the elimination rounds. So elimination round 1, we have Gorillas versus Legion, and then Thieves versus Rocker, Texas versus London Royal Ravens, and then Subliners versus Mutineers. Going into this LA Gorillas Vegas Legion map, Vegas looked pretty dominant towards the end of qualifiers for Major 3, and then you come into facing an LA Gorilla team who didn't really show out as much as you thought they would in the Major. So coming into this, you're wondering how close it's going to be. They're going to be fighting for spots, trying not to get out of the tournament, and you end up having a 3-1 series out of the Gorillas and the Vegas Legion. Arcides, unfortunately, does come out with an injury in the very first map. He was hoping he would be able to play through it, but he just wasn't able to. So praise up to Arcides. Hopefully he's feeling better. Hopefully he's, getting his injury taken care of and feeling healthier 100% for the next qualifier for the Major 4. Vegas ends up having a pretty dominant Embassy hardpoint with a 250 to 124. And then going into your search and destroy on Greenberg Hotel, Vegas has a quick 6-0 win on that. And then jumping into the Albagra Fortress, coming into that, you have Marky B, their coach, subbing in for the LA Gorillas, and they end up winning 3-1 map count on Albagra Fortress, which is a cheese map. You can get trapped in those spawns real quick. You're never expecting to get any kind of wins on that. So you always know that usually if you have offense and you can play one good offensive round and you can play a dominant defense, you're pretty set in that, because it's just way easy to pin them in the back of P3 towards top maps. It's easy to pin the offensive team back there, so you get them in a little spawn trap. And then going into the final hard point of the series, we have Vegas Legion coming out on top with a 250 to 213 win on Mercado S&D. And with the whole entire series, Clayster drops a 1.3, Temp drops a 1.8, and then you have TJ Holly dropping a 1.20 over the whole entire series, and then 2 Real coming in with a 0.86, which doesn't really show everything that he was doing on the map. He was finding lanes, he was cutting through, and he was just trying to build time for his team so he could hold off until his reinforcements could definitely get there. So now going into our next losers bracket map, we have the Thieves versus the Rocker. So the Rocker, unfortunately, have an abysmal Major 3 qualifiers. They go 0-5. You're wondering if maybe something needs to change, maybe just something in the group isn't working, and how the chemistry is doing, because they looked dominant in Major 1. Going into Raleigh, they looked clean. They looked like they were a force to be reckoned with picking up Afro and picking up Bance. They looked like a team that you did not want to mess with. So going into that, you now have them playing a LA team, LA Thieves team, coming off of a loss to the Atlanta FaZe. You're wondering how they're feeling. You're wondering if they have enough energy, if their heads are low, if they're going to come in and fry. And, looking at the map count, that's what you see them doing. So going into Hydroelectric, it's a very close one, but LA Thieves end up edging it out 250 to 236. And then going into search, LA's been a pretty good search team. Not to say a dominant one like FaZe. FaZe did go on that 13 game, I think it was actually 16 straight S&D wins, and going into that, nuts. But LA Thieves do come out with the win on that hotel search and destroy 6-2. And then going into control, LA is a very good control team. They come out with a quick 3-1, and they quick 3-0 the Rocker, unfortunately. So Rocker end up getting bounced out in their first match, and the things that you see from the Rocker side is Bance dropping a 0.72, Cammy dropping a 1.12, Attach dropping a 1.0, and then seeing Afro drop a 1.27. So you're wondering if this might just be a little hiccup in the road, if they're going to break things apart. I don't see them doing that. I really still think the Rocker are a very good team, and I can see them coming into fruition and getting those wins like they're supposed to, or not supposed to, but, you know, like we are kind of expecting them because they have an amazing team. And then on the other side, you see LAT, you see Kenny dropping a 0.82, doesn't show everything that he was doing on the map. He was holding hill time. He was trying to make sure that he could get all of his people in to back him up. He had 3 first bloods in the search series, and then going into Octane, he has a 1.11 KD, and then Envoy has a 1.04, and then Draza evens out 1.0. But if you're looking at damage side, Envoy drops the most damage throughout the series, drops a 74-61 damage throughout the whole entire series, ends up going 54 and 52 overall in the series. So yeah, that closes out the Rocker versus Thieves match. And then going into the next one, you have Optic versus London Royal Ravens. London Royal Ravens did not have that good of a qualifier, but you could tell that things for London were starting to click together right as they picked up Scrap again. They have Nasty, they have Asim, then they have Paulex. Paulex has usually been very good, especially against Optic. He's usually kind of the killer, especially last year for New York. But coming into this, you're wondering how close it's going to be. Is this going to be the end of the run for Optic? Is London going to start making a push? Maybe they're going to be an underdog team. And it ends up being kind of an all-out fight for it. So you see London come out on Hydroelectric, which is one of Optic's better maps. You see them come out with a 250-224 win. And then going into the search on Albagra Fortress, which Optic doesn't play a lot, they come out with a 6-4 win. They end up clutching that out. And then going into the control, you see the London Royal Ravens take it on Albagra Fortress. They played a hell of a defense, and they played an amazing offense. They end up winning 3-2. And then going into the final 2 matches, you're wondering, okay, 1-2 in this series, which way is it going to lean? Is London Royal Ravens going to close it out? And then Optic just starts to click on all cylinders. You see them come in and win 250-203 on the Mercado hardpoint, and then you see them close it out 6-4 with the search. So then you see Optic win in their first losers bracket match, eliminating London Royal Ravens. If we look at the numbers for each team, you have Asim dropping a 1.17 KD, you have Scraps dropping a 0.87, you see Paulex dropping a 0.77, you see Nasty dropping a 1.30. Nasty throughout the whole entire series was 108 and 83. He dropped 12,000 damage. And then you go on to the Optic side of things. Ghosty drops a 1.5. You see Dashy dropping a 1.15. Bruce has just been going off since Scumpy stepped down, and Scump just was like, hey, I'm falling down so you can go up. And we've obviously seen that Dashy is going up. And then you have Hook with a 0.8. That doesn't show everything that he was doing on the map. He's running around. He's breaking hills open. He's trying to get everything open for his team. And then Shotzi, the same thing, 0.93, but that doesn't say everything about the map. He had 10,000 damage. He was going and finding lanes. He was just trying to be annoying, just like Shotzi is, and, finding lanes so nobody can catch him, so he can just keep lanes open for his teammates. So Optic ended up winning that 3-2, and then moving on to the next elimination bracket game. Then we end out the first elimination round bracket with Mutineers versus Subliners. So Mutineers made a big change. They brought in Fellow, and they brought in Capsidal with their new roster. Anyway, continuing on, as you see, Florida came into this. We weren't knowing how they were going to be or how good they could be, bringing in Fellow and bringing in Capsidal. Cap was very good last year with Boston. I think he showed a lot of glimpses of what kind of SMG he can be. And Fellow last year definitely had the same shot. We saw what kind of role player he can be as well, and now it looks like the Mutineers are trying to build around those two. But they came out in the losers bracket having to face a New York Subliners team who, like I said, are coming off a fresh 3-1 loss to Ultra. So you're wondering if they're out for blood. They're going to make a losers bracket run, and you're wondering how the map is going to go. And going into it, you have the Mutineers winning a very close hotel hardpoint, 250 to 244. That's just a couple of extra seconds on hill time that I think the New York Subliners probably gave up just a little bit. So you see Florida come out and just get a quick win on the board. And then going into the second map, you see Florida start out hot. They get 4-0 on their on the search and destroy, and then you see Subliners pick up a map, and then after that it was just Florida all the way. They end up winning 6-1, and then you get to the control where you're wondering, is this going to be a swing map? The third map's always a swing map, so you're wondering how quickly, if they need to turn it around, can the Subliners turn it around? So the Subliners come out on Al Bagra Fortress with a quick 3-0. They win an offensive, defensive, offensive really quick with that. And then going into the next hard point, you're wondering if that's enough momentum for the Subliners to keep it going. And unfortunately, it's not. They end up losing to the Florida Mutineers 250 to 235. I still think the Subliners are a very good team. Having Hydra, having people like Skies, Kismet, and Priesta. Priesta, I think, was a great addition, and I think Skies was a great addition to the team in the offseason as well. But, yeah, Florida comes out with a 3-1 victory against the Subliners, and, that's just something that you're not expecting. So everybody on the New York Subliner side ended up going positive except for Priesta. Priesta did have kind of a tough time on these maps. He wasn't... I don't think he was in full Priesta form. And then going over to the other side for the Florida Mutineers, the one person that was positive was Havoc. And Havoc ends up having a 1.13 KD. And then you have Fellow dropping a 0.91, Capsidal dropping in a 0.88, and then Brack dropping a 0.86. That definitely doesn't tell everything of the story. I definitely think that those players were making plays to help their team flourish and definitely get this win over the Subliners. So now, going in to our winners round 2, we have Seattle versus Atlanta, which was a matchup of two people who have been in the past 2 grand finals. So you have Surge in the first grand finals against the Subliners, which they end up losing, and then you have the reigning grand finals champions in FaZe coming off that Major 2 win. So going into this, you're wondering how it's going to go. Surge is always given FaZe fits. Surge definitely has the firepower with Sib and accuracy. So you're wondering how this match is going to go, how everything is going to pan out, and you definitely get what you're looking for over this. So you come out, FaZe picks Embassy, so Embassy is the hard point, and they end up winning it pretty decisively, 250 to 185. I feel that Seattle just didn't have what they were looking for in that map. They kept getting shut down every time they had a rotation. Every time they had a hill, they kept having it broken. So I definitely think it could have gone better for Seattle. And then going into Search and Destroy, FaZe has been on a tear in Search and Destroy. You're wondering if this is going to be Seattle's way of bringing it back. Seattle's been a pretty decent Search and Destroy team lately. You're wondering how they might be able to match up against this Atlanta FaZe team, but Atlanta FaZe end up winning it 6-3. Abizi and Simp just always getting those first bloods, especially Abizi has 6 first bloods in the Search and Destroy, and you just know that he's always looking for that first pick, which will give his team the main advantage. And then going into the hotel control, Seattle really needs something to go. They're down 2-0 in the series. You're wondering if they're going to be able to make it happen. And you see Seattle come out and win 3-2. And Pred goes huge. He has a 40-24 match. Drops 4,000 damage, 1.6 KD, and he definitely was clicking on all cylinders. Then you have Civ following up behind him with a 29-28, and then you have Accuracy dropping a 26-20 and 20. Oh my goodness, 26-18 game in that control to help close it out. And then you kind of get to Surge's bread and butter map here. They've always been pretty dominant on Al-Bagra Fortress, and you see them come out and show why they've been dominant on Al-Bagra Fortress for Hardpoint. They end up winning 250 to 220. I feel that is the best map for Surge. They always have their clean rotations on that. They always know what the perfect timing is, where to hold. They've just been always dominant on that. But then it comes down to the Search and Destroy, which FaZe has been dominant in. Now, coming down to this last round, it does go to a round 11, and you're wondering if, this could break it. This could be Surge sending Atlanta down to the losers bracket, and fortunately, a couple of kills go Atlanta FaZe's way. You see Surge just not play certain situations correctly, and they end up losing a 3-2 advantage, which then ends up turning into the round 11 win for the Atlanta FaZe, pushing Atlanta into the winners bracket final. And then with the second winners bracket game, you have Breach versus Ultra. After seeing Breach 3-0 Optic, you're wondering how much firepower they definitely have. Beans was definitely showing out for that series. You definitely have Vivid, who can pop off at any time. Awakening's always been good, and so is Nero. And you're definitely looking at this going, this is going to be a battle between two pretty big giants in this series. And coming out on the first map with Al-Bagra Fortress, you see Breach coming out with a good right hook showing, hey, we're here, we're not going to play around, with a 250 to 213 win. And then going into the Search, definitely a lot closer. We end up going to a round 11, which ends up tipping towards Ultra's side, and Ultra ends up taking that 6-5. And then Ultra's been a pretty dominant control team, especially on El Asilo, and they end up winning that clean 3-0. So now with Boston's back against the wall, they need to win something here. They end up winning a very close game on Hardpoint on Greenberg Hotel, which ends up being 250 to 243. And then it takes you into your final match of Search and Destroy. Winner goes on, loser goes down to loser bracket, and Toronto Ultra show their dominance. They end up winning 6-2. and showing that they weren't here to play, pushing them to the winner's final match against the Atlanta FaZe. So going into the second round of the elimination bracket, we have Vegas Legion versus LAT and Optic versus Florida. So starting with Vegas versus LAT, oh man, what a crazy, crazy map starting out. The Thieves end up getting a 203-63 lead on Hotel. It doesn't seem like Vegas can get anything going, and I watched the most miraculous comeback I've ever seen. And Vegas end up closing it out 250-233. In that map, we have Clayster dropping a 1.7. We have Temp dropping a 1.63, and we have Two Real dropping a 1.13. And TJ Holly, the numbers don't say it, but just watching how he played, he was playing all the lanes correctly. He was watching everything that was going on. He was getting breaks. Even though he was getting traded, he was getting breaks for his team to enter those hard points, which helped them mount the comeback. But I think the biggest player to talk about was Clayster. Clayster really showed a lot of how much of a veteran he is with how much he needed to show it. By just putting the team pretty much on his back and saying, hey, we're going to get through this. We're going to just hold it down, and we're going to get all this hill, and we're going to get them. And especially coming in with Temp. Temp had 2 minutes and 15 seconds in hill time, which is half of all the hill time for them. But he drops 31 and 19. He goes almost double positive, and he was just ripping heads throughout the whole entire map. So watching that, you're wondering if this is LAT's way of crumbling and not being able to get their footing, especially after a quick 3-0 by Atlanta FaZe. And then going into the El Asilo Search and Destroy, Vegas had been having hiccups on their Search and Destroy maps lately. Their one positive has been TJ Holly. He is always showing off how good of a Search and Destroy player he really is. And they end up edging it out 6-5, round 11 ice for them. And then going into the control, LAT has always been, in my eyes, a very good control team up there with the Toronto Ultra. And they end up winning it 3-0, very decisive. And then going into this hardpoint map, after that swing map of LAT, needing to get something, so their backs are against the wall. They need to get something going. They end up coming out just a little flat-footed, losing some hill time, and the Vegas Legion end up winning 250-229, propelling them even further in the elimination bracket. And like I said, this matchup was crazy. This series was nuts, and watching that comeback on that first hard point was insane. I have never seen anything like that before, and it just took me by surprise to watch that happen. And then jumping into our next elimination bracket match, Optic Texas versus Florida Mutineers. Florida coming off that 3-1 win against the Mutineers. You're wondering how hot they are. Optic coming off that 3-2 win against the London Royal Ravens. You're wondering how much more they can keep it going. And it definitely shows. Optic Texas come out with a 250-204 win on Hydroelectric. That was a dominant map for them. They are now on I think it's a 3-game hardpoint winning streak since their loss to Boston in the first round. And then they come out with another decisive round, winning 6-3 on their hotel. Dashy definitely showed out on that map. He was showing why you give him the boomstick. That's why you put the sniper in Dashy's hands. He's going to show you how to get it done. And going into the control, where I think Optic definitely need their most work, it's close, but Florida ends up edging it out and winning 3-2. I definitely think that is where Optic needs the most amount of work. Their search is looking good, and their hardpoint is looking good. If they clean up their control, I definitely think they're going to be a very S-tier ranked team. They're going to be very dominant. And then going into the final hardpoint to close out the series, Optic win in decisive fashion, 250 to 117, closing out the Florida Mutineers and winning 3-1 in the whole entire series. I definitely think that this shows Optic's firepower, especially with Shotzi dropping a 1.38, Hook dropping a 1.23, Dashy dropping a 1.17, and then Ghosty just going even, dropping a 1.0. Throughout the whole entire series, Shotzi drops 10,000 damage, Hook drops 9, Dashy drops another 9, and then you have Ghosty dropping 8, which I definitely don't think shows all of the numbers. Ghosty has been a great vocal leader for them. He's been showing why they picked him up and showing the defiance of how well they are. Now, jumping into these next elimination bracket rounds, you have Breach versus Legion and Seattle versus Optic. Starting with the Breach versus Legion, Breach did just lose 3-2, but they still have the firepower to close things out, and they definitely do. So they end up winning the first hard point on Hotel, 250 to 200, and then going into the Al-Bagra Fortress search, Boston ends up looking very dominant on that as well, winning 6-2. And then Boston, being a new team with Beans, Vivid, Nero, and Awakening have been playing for the past 2 years, so they've definitely got some chemistry, and adding in Beans, they're trying to figure everything out. They look dominant on Control, and they end up winning 3-1. So that cleans out Vegas Legion after they had that miraculous comeback in the last series against LAT. That ends up ending their run with a quick 3-0 by Boston Breach. And now going into Seattle versus Optic, you're wondering how much more Optic can put in the tank, keep it going after them just 3-1ing Florida. So you come out, you see them on another hydroelectric. Optic ends up winning 250 to 209. Pretty dominant win, if you ask me. They were getting rotations, they were getting hill time, they were just showing what it means to them to get all the time. And then they end up coming into another Greenberg Hotel, search and destroy. They end up 6-1ing the Seattle Surge, showing their dominance in search and destroy. And then coming into the Control, unfortunately, they do drop a map, losing the Hotel Control 3-1. But then they decide to go toe-to-toe with the Giant on their map of Al-Bagra Fortress for the final hard point, and they end up just dominating it. They win 250 to 120. At one point, it looked like they were about to 100-point club the Seattle Surge, but that is where Optic is going to end the Seattle Surge's Major 3 run with a 3-1 series victory, propelling Optic to play a rematch of Boston Breach in the elimination round 4. So going into Sunday, we have FaZe versus Ultra and Boston Breach versus Optic Texas. So the first matchup in the winners final, you see Atlanta FaZe, which has been a dominant search and destroy team, and they were looking clean on hardpoint and just clean on control as well. You unfortunately see Ultra, who's been a very dominant hardpoint team as well, come out flat-footed, and they lose the first hardpoint, 250 to 197 on Hotel. So you see Abizi and Celium and Slasher and Simp showing what they really can do on the map when they have the free reins and they can run around and do what they need to do. But then coming into the search and destroy, you have FaZe losing it 6-3 after they had been on a 16-game search and destroy win streak, which was the longest, which is the league record. So you just see that Toronto's definitely got the firepower to hold up with the best of them. You see them win 6-3 in a very dominant fashion. They just kept it clicking, and they did not let Atlanta FaZe up after that. And then you see the best control teams facing off, and you see the better one edge it out as Toronto Ultra ends up taking it 3-1 on Greenberg Hotel. And then you come into the final hard point with FaZe just needing to pick up one more map to make it go to a round 5. You see Toronto Ultra win it by 10 seconds of hill time with a 250-240 win over the Atlanta FaZe, which then pushes them into losers bracket and pushes Ultra into the grand final. And with that, we come into the elimination round 4, which is another great game. Optic versus Breach, and this is Optic's kind of comeback game. They're like, we are going to get our get back for you 3-0ing us in the first round of winners. And you see why they've been a dominant team. They end up 100-point clubbing the Boston Breach on Albagra Fortress with a 250-91 dominant hardpoint win. And then you see Optic unfortunately drop the search and destroy, where they lose 6-3 on Greenberg Hotel, which has been their bread and butter lately in this losers bracket run. And you have the series tied up 1-1, and you're wondering what it's going to be like going into this swing map in control. It's on El Asilo. Optic doesn't play that as much, and Boston had been 3-0 on this, and you see Optic edge it out and win 3-2, giving Boston their first loss on El Asilo. And then coming into the final hard point, you see Optic with another show of dominance on their hardpoint play, where they go 250 to 174 on the Mercado hardpoint, and you see them close out Boston, putting them in top 4. And now we come on to the very closing out of the major. You see Optic versus FaZe. It's a matchup that's always great. You love to see Optic play FaZe. You love to watch this duel. And with how well Optic has been doing, you're wondering how much they can keep it clicking, especially against the defending last major champions. And wow, it starts out amazing for them. They end up 100-point clubbing Atlanta FaZe, winning 250-96 on Albagra Fortress. And that was a very dominant win for the team. You see Shotzi going off, you see Dashy going off, and everybody's just going positive. You see Dan Ghosty going off 21-15. You see Dashy dropping 15-12. You see Hook 20-18. You see Shotzi 25-15. And they're all holding hill time. You see Ghosty with 1 minute 19 seconds. You see Dashy with 1 minute 31 seconds. You see Hook with 1 minute 2 seconds. And yes, you only see Shotzi with 28 seconds in hill time, but that's because everybody else has the hill time to let Shotzi just run and be in free flow state and running around, getting picks, getting lanes, and just closing off areas and spawns for the other team. And then going into the search and destroy, Optic's been looking pretty dominant, and FaZe definitely looking dominant, especially after just having their 16-game, 13-game win streak in S&D. I'm not sure of the numbers. Snapped by Toronto Ultra. FaZe just pick it right back up where they were, winning the search and destroy 6-2. So pretty dominant fashion by FaZe, especially in their search and destroy, with Optic being the search and destroy team that they are. And then we come into the control. FaZe is very dominant on their control, just like the Toronto Ultra are. And you see Optic Texas, coming out with a 3-1 victory on their hotel. They are trying to just close out FaZe. They're doing everything they can, and now the series is 2-1. And then coming into this final hard point, you have a lot of big plays by Shotzi and Dashy and everything, especially coming into their final break on Barbershop. You see Shotzi and Dashy both get that pinch to get them their final points that they needed on the hard point, and they end up winning 250 to 227, which then propels Optic into the grand final versus the Ultra. And starting this out, you're wondering how this is going to go. Optic's been on a tear with their hard point, and unfortunately you see that tear come to an end with a 250 to 152 loss to the Toronto Ultra on hotel. And going into the search and destroy, Optic kind of has been struggling, but you see them close out a 6-3 victory on Albagra Fortress after they had just lost their hard point. So that puts the series even, and now they're going up against a very dominant control team and on hotel, and they end up winning it 3-2. Dan Ghosty just definitely had a lot of closeouts for that map, and he just showed his why he got picked up by Optic, showing a 28-15, and then you have Shotzi just running around the map, just trying to create lanes and everything, and Hook and Dashy, they just show dominance. They show why they're there, and that they're a force to be reckoned with. So that puts Optic up 2-1 in the grand final. Going into our next hard point, Optic's looking to take that 3-1 edge, but unfortunately, Ultra's just the better hard point team, and they end up winning 250 to 170. And then that brings it back to a 2-2 series. Going into our next search and destroy, it comes down to a round 11, which unfortunately Optic just couldn't ice it up, and Ultra ends up winning 6-5 on Bringberg Hotel, which has been Optic's map lately, but Optic just couldn't close it out. And then coming into the final control, El Asilo, which is Toronto's bread and butter map. They are 12-9, I believe, on this map. And Toronto ends up just starting quickly with a quick 2-0 start, and Optic ends up fighting resiliently to bring it back, where they end up bringing it back to a 2-2, and then unfortunately, based off kills, because they were tied with ticks, Toronto ends up getting the defensive round, and Toronto is able to close it out, which ends the grand final with Toronto Ultra being your Major 3 champions with a 4-2 score series map count for Toronto against Optic Texas. Now, my little points that I want to add on to this is Optic had a hell of a run, especially starting in winners and losing. They had an amazing losers bracket run, and I definitely think that going into Major 4, they are going to be a force that needs to be reckoned with now that their team is starting to click on all cylinders with each other. And to see Optic dominantly win against a good Atlanta FaZe team shows how scary that they can be going into the future. And the same thing goes for Breach with a 3-0 win over Optic in the first bracket of winners. Boston is going to be a very dangerous team, and so is Optic, and it's definitely showing for Toronto Ultra as well. Toronto is definitely showing how dominant of a team they can be, especially if they can clean up a lot of things with their control to make it even better, make their search even better, and their hard point. they're showing how dominant of a team they can be. And Surge, I think, just ended up having kind of a bad bracket with this one. And they're definitely showing how much of a dominant team they can be. But I think going into Major 4, there's a lot of things you can look at. And I think this is going to be a very, very good next Major 4. Starting at the end of March, going into April, Major 4 being held in Raleigh, North Carolina, or Columbus. I can't remember where it is being held, but I think that's going to be great. I definitely think qualifiers are going to be an amazing show out of all the teams, and I think as an Optic Texas fan, I think this is going to be their time to show what they can do, and I think they're definitely a force to be reckoned with going into the next major. So if you guys enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more content like this, hit that like and subscribe button down below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.